Welcome to the ADAverse, the Australian business community podcast for all things automation, data and AI.
Hey everyone, and welcome to this edition of the ADAverse podcast. ADAverse is the Australian business community for all things automation, data, and AI. And today we're diving into an increasingly hot topic around PII data redaction in an AI-driven world. I'm joined this morning by Alex. And Alex, let me hand over to you for a quick intro to who you are.
Hi, Shaun. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Alex. I'm the Senior Partnership Manager for ABBYY Australia. One of my passions over the last 18 years in this company is reduction of confidential data, PII and PCI.
Thanks, Alex, and great to have you to share some of your knowledge in this hot topic and exciting space. So, Alex, just to get started, right, for many, this might be a new topic, right? And you've obviously got heaps of experience in this space, but let's start off really basic. So tell us a little bit about what exactly is PII or PCI data and what type of information are we actually talking about when we talk about this type of information?
Okay, so PII and PCI, it's a personally identifiable data and payment card information. So simple as that. I think it's quite self-explanatory what this data is, and this is what is covered by GDPR or some other similar legislation in different countries. That's all refers to us as people, our name, our address, our phone number, but yeah, most importantly, our bank information, bank details, our TFNs, our social security number for America, anything that can be used against you, anything that can be used to steal some money from you or apply for a loan on your behalf or anything like that. And with our level of internet penetration, with our level of e-commerce, etc., so our details and personal details are stored by many organizations, but by many services. And actually, the biggest concern and the biggest anxiety is, do they store this information properly? So yeah, this is why PII and PCI handling and PCI compliance is a big thing these days. Because back in the day, people thought that, all the information will be visible. There will be no secrets from anyone. But these days, it doesn't seem to be the case. And people want to protect the information as much as they can.
Yeah, gotcha. Just to kind of put some acronyms out. So PII stands for Personally Identifiable Information, and PCI stands for Payment Card Information. And as you said there, so it's all things like credit card numbers, tax file numbers, email addresses, names, phone numbers. And really why this data matters so much is because people, if they get hold of this data, they can do things like identity theft or fraud or personal privacy and the like. So it begs the question, why do organizations hold on to these types of documents with personal data, especially if these are physical or scanned, and why do they hold on to this data for so long?
Well, because they have to. Obviously, many organizations, government included, store our information because, they need to interact with us. They need to know who we are, and obviously they need to charge us for some services or for some goods, right? And there are some organizations that keep our information and charge us on a regular basis. One of the most obvious examples, and actually that was one of our first customers in this area, is gyms. Gym clubs, fitness clubs, swimming pools, you name it. When you enroll to a swimming pool or a gym, you apply for a direct debit. You just sign your direct debit application. Now it's all electronic, primarily. But back in the day, it was a piece of paper, and even these days, very often. It's a piece of paper that you need to fill in, that you need to provide your credit card numbers or your bank details. And then you send it to the gym, or you just hand it over the counter to the gym staff. They scan it, they arrange direct debit, they run the payment, but this piece of paper, do they store it somewhere? They have to store it, actually. They have to store it for over the full term of your participation in this gym, or over when they provided this service for you, and they must store it 7 years after the provision of the service is over. And this is why the digital information in databases or in some payment portals, it's secured, it's safe, it's hashed, everything is fine with that. But how do you know that piece of paper that you signed is stored properly? It can be stored next to the fax machine. It can be stored in someone's email. It can be stored in SharePoint. It can be stored in a folder, you name it. And there are many, many examples in real life, not only in gyms, but even in laundry. Sometimes in order to get your laundry done, you need to just provide your credit card information in a piece of paper, just put it on top of your dirty laundry stack, and hope that it will not be misused. It's also sounds ridiculous, yes, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I hear you. So common document types could be things like scanned forms, even rental agreements, payslips, health records. And as you said, there's that regulatory requirement to store some of that information, and really kind of that could sit across mailboxes, network drive, SharePoint, and very, very little protection around that.
Yeah.
So it kind of moves on to the hidden risk lurking in these different file systems, right? So obviously some of this data could be scanned data, could be handwritten documents. And why are these types of documents particularly risky when it comes to PII data?
Well, because they are just images. And again, if we're talking information that is entered directly into ERP or directly into payment portal, there are not too many moving parts. There is only up to the person who just filled in your details in the hotel, for example, and forgot about these details straight away. But if there is a piece of paper, there is not much compliance with this piece of paper, and especially if it was scanned using a multifunctional device or scanner and uploaded somewhere, how do you know that this information is stored somewhere? So, as I said, there are too much variety of where this data can be stored, too many moving parts, too many steps until the data gets into the payment portal and properly secured. And this actually creates lots of potential vulnerabilities in this pathway, in this chain. And this is, I think, maybe I'm biased, sorry, but I think that area is overlooked because, again, the system can be secured, PII DSS compliant, has all the certification, all the paperwork, all the cool stuff, what have you. But again, the human in this chain is the weakest link, and people emails and people workspaces and people's computers, normally they are very, very not unprotected, but I would say potentially vulnerable. And I think these days hackers can get into your computer, they can get into your server, and there are many cases like that, social engineering and so on, when hackers can get access to computers or servers, and they can hack lots of databases or image vaults.
Yeah. Gotcha, right. And I guess unlike databases, these scan files are really hard to secure and really harder to audit. If we needed to do manual review around that, it's time consuming, it's expensive, it's error prone. And even if we sent these documents to third-party vendors, that could be risky, especially if that data is outside of Australia. And many companies used to ignore this issue. But as I understand, things have changed, right? So what has actually changed? Why is redaction getting so much attention now, and why is it such a hot topic?
Well, I think everyone heard about recent very, very big flops with the data privacy. I'm talking Medibank, I'm talking Optus, Telstra, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of much smaller cases of data breaches. Everything becomes very centralized. Everything becomes very important in terms of service provision. And actually, looking at this, the government recently introduced much higher penalties for data breach. If previously, when we just started looking at this area, the maximum penalty was $2.2 million for this. Now, quote, in 2022, following the government introduced the Privacy Legislation Amendment, Enforcement and Other Measures Bill, which increased the maximum penalties to $50 million or 3 times the value of any benefits obtained through the misuse of information, or 30% of a company adjusted turnover in the relevant period. And I think for businesses, it's a big thing. Previously, it was just something good to have, something that, yes, it just doesn't generate any revenue, but it's good to have. But these days, if there is a potential to get a penalty of 50 million, this is becoming a very hot topic. This becoming very important and very, very serious. And this is why we have so many requests from financial organizations, banks, credit unions, government itself, government agencies, schools, educational institutions, you name it. So all the companies that store people information, and they companies and organizations that obey Privacy Act 1988 and Freedom of Information Act, because they are big these days. They are very important these days.
Man, pretty crazy, right? $50 million or 30% of turnover. I mean, those are massive, massive penalties for data breaches. So as you say, companies now are under pressure to actively prevent rather than just to respond to some of these events. So let's move on to kind of, well, how do people solve these problems, right? So manually redacting sensitive data must be an absolute nightmare. So I know some of the solutions that we get involved in is where we combine the worlds of intelligent document processing and automation and AI to solve this specific challenge. So let's talk about how people might actually solve the challenges that they come across in this redaction world.
Well, that's one of the reasons why the penalty was so low and why people overlook that issue. I mean, businesses overlook that issue so much. It was extremely hard to walk through billions of documents, millions of documents, or literally billions of documents, or billions of pages, and find this information. So for a person, it's extremely, hard to go through 200 pages document and find the TFN number that needs to be redacted on page, 57. And if you look through these documents over and over all day long, that's extremely tedious and extremely error prone, as you mentioned. And it's extremely expensive because you cannot outsource this task and you cannot send these documents overseas because, guessed it, legislation and data sovereignty. It must be kept onshore. So Australian employees must look at this data and they must redact this data manually. That was before. And again, that was extremely expensive and error prone. In some of the cases, the accuracy of human-based redaction or human-powered redaction was about 60-70%, which is nothing, which is just waste of time. Given that the penalties were not that high, that was put aside. Nowadays, thanks to AI, thanks to machine learning, it became much, much cheaper. It became much more, let's say, feasible to do, especially for unstructured documents. And obviously, this caused some high demand for this sort of solutions on the market because it's cheaper and it's now more dangerous to keep the information as it is rather than to protect it.
Yeah, makes sense, right? So I guess this combination of automation and AI in combination with intelligent document processing has just provided us the capability to do this redaction at high speed, high accuracy. And I guess there's a plethora of different ways that we can approach redaction in these documents. So I know from chatting to you, there's things like template-based redaction, and that would be kind of a strategy for known forms. There might be keyword-based redaction, and that would be around semi-structured documents, or perhaps there's even machine learning and handwriting recognition for messy or unstructured contents. And really, that is all put through a feedback loop that makes these models get better and better over time. So it's really a great solve to some of these challenges that companies are having today. But let's move on to the real world impact. Can you share, and perhaps you can't give us specific names of companies, but talk to us a little bit about some examples of how this kind of solution has helped companies in the real world solve some of these challenges that they might have?
Well, it makes companies more protected. It makes companies more compliant, especially if in case of audit, especially in case of IPO acquisition due diligence and so on. And talking about the ways how the data can be redacted, so we can approach this using different technologies or different techniques or different methods, and it very dependent on the use case and very dependent on the documents that we're dealing with. We distinguish a few types of documents. The first one is so-called fixed forms. Fixed forms, very unified forms where all the fields located in exactly the same position all the time. For example, tax return form or a migration card or something like that. So something that you can fill in by hand, something that can be scanned. And the software knows that the data is located in exactly identical areas, no matter what page you're dealing with. That's a low-hanging fruit for any data capture software and data redaction software because we know what to redact. So you can just simply put a black patch on top of the field with your credit card number or TFN number, and that's about it. That's easy. And that's what we've been doing, actually, not just we, but many companies have been doing for years and years now. There can be forms, as we call them, semi-structured forms. They have the same information. They may or may not have credit card numbers or TFNs, and these fields located in different areas. Sometimes it can be on the top, Sometimes it can be in the bottom, on the right, left, wherever. In this case, we need to add some rules, how to find these fields and redact the area. And in this case, we use keywords: credit card number, card holder name, expiry date, card number, Visa, MasterCard, whatever. So specific keywords for the credit card slip, somewhere in the bottom of the page normally. So this works also quite well. In this case, we don't even need to recognize the credit card number by itself, but we need to identify the area where the credit card number was printed or written. But obviously, this method also has its boundaries. So it relies on keywords and relies on certain patterns of this credit card number block. And obviously, not all the documents have it. Sometimes the TFN can be mentioned in the full big slab of text somewhere in the middle of the paragraph. Or sometimes it can be written somewhere in the bottom without any keywords, scribbled by hand or something like that. And in this case, the machine learning helps a lot. And machine learning actually covers the rest of the cases, which cannot be covered by a keyword-based approach or by coordinates, by reduction by coordinates. In this case, it's possible to actually train the neural network to identify these fields on multiple examples. So going forward, it could identify areas with scribbled numbers, areas with the credit card numbers, TFNs, whatever, and redact them. Wherever they're written, are they messy or are they accurate? Machine learning or neural network will find it. And in most cases, we combine all three methods where applicable, just to have like a double, triple tap on one field using different technologies. And that works with a very, very high accuracy, and that allows us save a lot of manual efforts. And obviously, don't expose documents to multiple people, because this is actually one of the biggest factors as well. You don't want people, like people in the data centers who deal with the information, see the whole document and potentially make a screenshot or something like that.
Yeah. So it sounds like, the use cases of where companies might store this information is quite wide and varied. So as you said there, right, it could be anyone from the local gym or signing up for a swimming pool through to kind of financial services organizations who are storing credit card information or TFN data, through to accounting practices, all the way through to schools or anything like that might have this challenge where they might have some of this data stored in either structured documents, semi-structured documents, or even scribbles on the back of a napkin where someone's popped in their credit card details.
Yeah.
And it sounds like the technology's moved on quite a lot, where we've got lots of strategies where we can try find this data very easily and redact the information. And of course, the reason why people want to do it is because there's massive fines if there were data leaks. And it sounds like, that we just have to look to the press to figure out some of these companies that have kind of had challenges in this space and really what the outcomes of some of that is. So if someone said, hey, well, this is definitely me and I've got some of this data and I might need to make a plan to get some of this data redacted, how do people get started on this journey, and where do they get started on this journey?
Well, it's very individual. It's very dependent on the current input and actually what is currently happening with these documents, how are they stored, if there is a backlog of this document, or businesses just receive these documents every day via some channels, email, online portals, via post, faxes, or whatever. In most cases, there is a huge backlog of this data stored somewhere in folders or SharePoint, and much smaller stream of documents every day that companies receive. And when we approach this sort of task, we try to understand, okay, how can we extract these documents from the existing storage, and how we can hand them over to the reduction engine. And then we obviously need to analyze what these documents are, how typical these documents, how standard these documents are. Are there just 30 types of forms across the whole business that need to be redacted? That's the lowest hanging fruit. That's the easiest input, the easiest task. Or there is a variety of absolutely unpredicted full text documents, contracts, leasing agreements, direct debit agreements, etc. Not forms, right? And are there any other documents where numbers can be handwritten? And based on that, we obviously utilize the matching technologies or matching techniques. And yeah, this is how it works. And obviously, if company only need to redact PSI information or credit card numbers, that's easier. But if company needs to redact names, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses, etc., and it must filter what information to redact and what information to leave on the paper, because it's all falls under FOI, Freedom of Information Act, that makes things much more complicated, because we need to identify if this name should be redacted on this particular document provided to this particular person or not. It's challenging, but it's also possible thanks to machine learning.
Yeah. So it sounds like it starts with really a discovery phase to understand what data you have, where it lives, and then depending on what that data is, create a strategy that combines the document redaction software with potentially some automation to go figure out what we need to do, pick up that data, redact that data, and maybe even place it back where it actually came from to make sure that we've cleaned up all of those bits and pieces. So I know that's a very structured approach. I know working with you personally, we've done that a good few times, and it sounds like there's very much a repeatable process that we can help organizations out with should they have this specific challenge. All right, Alex, I think that's been really good just to cover kind of the PII and PCI redaction space and kind of what the challenges are, why they're such a challenge, and how people might be able to get started. But now moving on to the last part of the episode is what I call the ADAverse hot seat. And this is where I send off rapid fire questions to you, which I put you in the hot seat and you get to answer. So are you ready for the hot seat?
No, but let's do it.
All right, perfect. So first question, Alex, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a journalist, but I think now I combine journalist skills and some other of my skills. So I'm a salesperson. And I wanted to be a salesperson, apparently.
From journalist to salesman in one foul swoop. So that sounds
I'm
really
just not selling news. I'm selling something else. It's all about selling.
That's it. Excellent. Let's move across to the next question. So what is something on your bucket list that you have ticked off or you've done on your bucket list?
It's a good question. And I have a pretty big bucket list, to be honest. Okay, let's do easy one. I visited Rome. That was in my bucket list.
Yeah, brilliant. Rome is one of my favorite cities in the world. So I've definitely had Rome on my bucket list as well. And let me ask the opposite of that. What is something on your bucket list that you still yet to do or you still want to take off?
Oh, this list even bigger, much bigger. Yeah, there is lots of stuff. Lots of stuff.
Okay, brilliant. If you could recommend just one book to the audience to read, or a book that had a big impact in your life, what type of book would you recommend for the audience to have a listen to or read?
Books about ideas and what happens to these ideas and how ideas change worlds. I know that sounds a bit pathetic, but yeah, sci-fi. Anything about sci-fi.
All good. Well, I mean, sci-fi is very much relevant at the moment with all the wonderful things happening in the automation, data and AI world and that type of thing. I mean, some of the sci-fi that was way back when is actually becoming a reality now. So it's interesting to see.
And by the way, there was a novel of Arthur Clarke, the one who wrote Odyssey 2001, where he predicted lots of stuff. So it was about a device that lets any person see what other persons do anytime. And actually, he describes the future when there are no secrets of any person from any other person. And if you remember, people disclosed lots of their details, lots of personal details, their addresses, their phones, whatever, in their social network. And at some point, it became so dangerous. So it was interesting to see what was predicted and what actually happening now.
Yeah, brilliant. All right, last question for the hot seat. How do you want to be remembered?
Well, as a good person.
As a good human. That's it. Be a good human, one of my personal mottos. So I think that's a great way to finish off the hot seat. Thank you so much for your time today and taking us through all of your great knowledge on document redaction and the like. Just before we leave for today, is there any parting advice for companies trying to get ahead of this PII redaction challenge?
Well, just look at this. Look at the penalties. Go to the websites and see how severe they are. And by the way, speaking of our future, the screws will be tightened on this topic. There will be more initiatives from the government. Obviously, as a biased person representing the vendor who provides this sort of software, I would recommend to look at this area and make an action. Do an action, something. Yeah.
Yeah. As I often say, it's no longer about if you're going to get started, but rather when, and when should be today, right?
Yeah. The future is here. Information these days is a very valuable asset for good guys and for bad guys, and for bureaucrats as well.
Right, absolutely. All right, Alex, thank you so much for your time. Thank you for joining us on the ADAverse podcast, and we look forward to speaking to you soon. See ya.
Likewise. Thanks, Shaun. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Be part of the community by visiting adaverse.com.au. See you in the ADAverse.